You're listening to From the Chair, and I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Join us each episode as we talk to athletic directors from across America. We're going to talk about topics like leadership, career development, issues of the day, and I can promise you we're going to have some fun along the way too. So sit back, listen in, and let's dive in. Let's go. All right, welcome into today's episode. I'm really fortunate to have our guest today, Doug Gillin, the athletic director at Appalachian State University. Doug, thanks for being with us.
Mike, thanks for having me. Appreciate you having me today.
Absolutely. Good to catch up with you. Got a lot I want to talk about, and I want to talk about your time at Appalachian, but some other things just in the industry in general, and maybe even your time in the multimedia rights business. And so we'll touch on a number of different topics. But to begin with, Appalachian State being a job now that you've held as athletic director for, I think you're in your 8th year, if I'm not mistaken, and have seen a lot of growth there at the university. And one of the things that I think is really interesting to dive into, and you have experience in 2 different ways. You were involved with Missouri as the transition of the Southeastern Conference. And then when you got to Appalachian State, we're in the middle of the transition, the beginning stages of the transition of FCS to FBS. And as you've seen over these last few weeks, there continue to be a number of teams that are interested in making this move to FBS seemingly. And we even had the recent announcement of a proposed merger between the WAC and the ASUN. And I'm curious your learnings from what you guys have set the standard for success, at least in football, with your movement into the FBS. So you were doing something right. I know you've got a great history there at Appalachian, but I would be interested in giving us some pointers on the things that you saw as you went through that maybe you're surprised, the things that you guys had to commit to, and things that others might want to hear about as they consider the move.
Yeah, I think. So thanks, Mike. I think from maybe both moves. Both moves were already decided before I arrived. Whether it was at the SEC, at Mizzou, Mike Alden, and they had already made that decision to go to the SEC when I was there. Now, and part of that was, how do you kind of make sure your facilities and your revenues and how's your budget line up? And the same with App. When I arrived here, we were already in FBS, and we'd already competed one season in FBS. And the quick funny story I told Coach Satterfield when I arrived is the year before they were 1-5 in their first year in the FBS. When I got here, we were 5-1 in the first year, so made some of the decision making a little bit easier. But I do think some of the pointers, certainly when you look at it, you can do a lot of revenue modeling. You can do a lot of projections on the expense side and the revenue side. Probably the expenses are always going to be higher, no matter what you model. They're always going to be higher, and the revenue might not be as high. And for us in particular, here at Appalachian State, we had to be really innovative, very entrepreneurial. We had to, decide how we're going to sell more season tickets, how we're going to win at the gate, merchandise and concessions and special events, all of those things to continue to raise revenue. Because one of the things that we're competing against is, certainly the folks in our league, certainly the folks in other leagues. And some of those have revenue baked in, with whether it's big TV deals or bigger stadiums, so you're competing against those too, because, we're all in it to compete at the highest level. And then the only other thing that I would add, Mike, is because I do think it's interesting, is we are now, the way I look at it, kind of in my almost third transition, in that the new Sun Belt is completely different than the old Sun Belt. I think it's one of the top leagues in America, built on geography, built on winning at the gate, and not necessarily off big TV contracts. Again, being entrepreneurial, innovative, how you compete.
That's great. I'm interested a little bit too in the fundraising growth that you guys have had there at the university. You little known fact. In fact, really nobody knows this other than me and a couple others. In the very early. Let's see, when would it have been? Late '80s, rather. I was actually offered the opportunity to come to Appalachian to be at the time, I think the title was the director of the Yosef Club, and I was at Wake Forest and ended up deciding to stay at Wake. Though I will tell you, it was a very attractive opportunity because growing up in Western North Carolina, obviously held Appalachian State in high regard. But even at that time, Doug, Appalachian some things in the fundraising side of things that were innovative and on the forefront. But I know that it had to have grown, exponentially over since that was, half a century ago, right? So
Right.
I'm interested the what you guys have prioritized in your fundraising efforts and the kind of growth you've seen as you have transitioned from FCS now into your 7 years into this on the FBS side.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it's intentional. So we've led the Sun Belt Conference in attendance the last 2 years, broke last year's record again this year, had all-time attendance in AppSt history and in the Sun Belt history. So we're really proud of that. One of the things that we're fortunate enough to have is a passionate fan base. And when I arrived, said this was my 8th football season, we purposefully said, hey, we got to figure out from our season tickets, we got to grow our season ticket base. One of those was, okay, we're in kind of this new conference. Not a lot of folks know some of the schools at the time. We've certainly grown to know them. And then, we had to bring in some teams that would help us grow our fan base. And can never thank, University of Miami came in here in 16, and Wake Forest came in here in 17, and then University of North Carolina came in here last year. And so then East Carolina, Marshall, Charlotte, all of those are sellouts for us. And then for us also, we've really been intentional in making family weekend and homecoming sellouts too. So like when we look at next year already, we know that we're going to be sold out every game next year. We'll have our 4 conference games that are really, really attractive, and then our non-conference are going to be family weekend and homecoming. And at Appalachian, we sell those out. So how does that tie to fundraising? We wanted to raise our season ticket base. You raise your season ticket base, then it also raises some of your season ticket donations and your parking donations, as we all know. And so as we continue to grow that base, and we've tripled it since I've been here in 8 years in terms of season ticket holders. Last year, an all-time high, over 12,000 here at AppSt. Part of that is we wanted to bring in opponents that they wanted to see, and certainly, again, back to our most recent realignment, that was even more evident in how we decided to go about that in the Sun Belt Conference. But that allowed us then to raise ticket prices, allowed us to raise ticket donation, it allowed us to raise parking. And then certainly for us at our level, we control all concessions, we control all merchandise. And so we're able to really be intentional and focus on all those revenue streams. And that's really helped us from a fundraising standpoint. We'll reach all-time highs again this year from a donation standpoint. And now, we've already done $160 million. We called it an initiative here, versus a campaign. We did a $60 million initiative when I first got here. We hit that in 5 years. And now we embarked this past fall on a $100 million initiative to continue to build. And we're $28 million into that, kind of in a silent phase. So a lot of positives. A lot of it is, making sure that you have a great product, great fan base, and then make sure you take care of the fan base. We've game days. We were intentional about game days. We brought in NFL folks in here to kind of look at our game day and give us advice. And that's really helped us over the last couple of years. So really paying attention to every little piece of detail that we can.
Yeah, so it's impressive to me. For a long time, everybody wanted to do a 2-for-1, right? And now you've gotten into this home and home situation with some of the brands that really matter to your fans, and getting UNC to come up to the mountain this year. I know what a big deal that was. Certainly, you've privately told me how much you appreciate Bubba being willing to do that, and in preparing for that game and what became ultimately, I think, the largest crowd that you guys have now hosted in Boone. What did it tell you about? You've alluded to the things that you're working on. Does it tell you that you believe you can have another expansion? Does it tell you, hey, for a game like this, that's kind of a one-time thing every now and then? Where does it lead you as it relates to your planning for the future?
Yeah, I think it does tell us we can have another expansion, and we're actively working on that right now. The good news is when we talk about expansion, we want to be the best 35 to 40,000 seat stadium in America. We're not trying to be bigger than that. And it's a great atmosphere. If anybody's ever been up here to watch a football game here, it's really electric. It's special. So we do think we can expand tactfully. Our premium inventory is all gone. Waiting lists on all of our premium inventory. So we think we can build on the east side. Our expansion also includes, part of all of this revenue growth, expansion growth is allowed us to build a brand new track, plans indoor, outdoor tennis, plans new softball, field hockey facility, et cetera. That's all helped fuel that expansion as well. But we feel really good now. And as I mentioned, so when we're looking at regional rivalries, and I mentioned, next year, 2023, we have Marshall, Coastal, Carolina coming in. You have Georgia Southern coming in. You have another Sun Belt Conference school coming in. Then you got your non-conference. So you have 4 conferences, but we also have visiting fans come too, which I think was really important as we looked at this, as I've mentioned. And so that continues to allow us the opportunity for growth. And as we saw last year, we'll have the same this year when East Carolina comes in, and like not just in conference, but we've been intentional doing deals like obviously John Gilbert with Mike Hill, doing deals with local schools in the state, and those games are as popular as any of them. So when Charlotte comes or East Carolina comes, and vice versa, and back to what you mentioned about Bubba, because I can't thank him enough for doing the deal with us. But when we talked about it, to his credit, we said, hey, it was really good for college football. It's good for college football in the state, and sometimes I think whatever state you're in, it makes sense to keep those dollars in the state. It's great for fan bases that can drive, and it really adds, and it's collegial. Even though you're competing on that day, we all live in the state together, and so we compete like heck, all schools that we play in the state, but the fan bases are great. I mean, we just went down and played basketball at Charlotte the other night, and the fan bases couldn't have been better. We competed for 2 hours, but everything was respectful, and it was just great camaraderie and within state competition, which I think there's something to be said for that.
To that point, when I was at Wake Forest, again, back in the dark ages in the late 80s, we would play Appalachian on a regular basis in football. At that time, just in Grove State, what was Grove Stadium, now Truist Field in Winston-Salem. And even though we had our conference opponents coming in, by far the most electric game every year was when Wake Forest played Appalachian State. And a lot of black and gold in the stadium, the band from Appalachian coming down the mountain, just incredible environment. And by the way, Appalachian State picked off Wake Forest a couple of those times when I was there too, and it was just a great spirit around it. I want to talk. You mentioned Charlotte, you mentioned East Carolina. There are now, I think, 7 FBS schools in the state of North Carolina. Obviously, the population of North Carolina continues to grow. Wonderful place to live and to be from, and to do the work you're doing. You have won for a long time there in Boone. When Jerry Moore was there, and you guys obviously had great success in the FCS, won championships, known for a long time for knocking off Michigan in the Big House back in the early 2000s. And then over the last, 5 or 6 years now, I believe this is true. Schools that have had better records in football in the FBS are Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Georgia. And that's a pretty good class to be in. Again, as I've said, having been from that area of the world, I know a little bit about the culture and my own theories on why Appalachian State football has been successful. But I'm curious, doesn't have it's the coaching that you guys have had, the consistency in the coaching. It's obviously your support and the support of the institution. But I'm curious as to your thoughts about why you've been able to maintain that consistent high level.
Yeah, I think one of the things you're right. It's hard to maintain. It's sometimes the old adage, it's harder to get on top than stay on top. And this year we saw that a little bit, right? We kind of stepped back a little bit, but certainly one of the things is that you have coaching transitions. The things that haven't changed are passionate fan base, the history and tradition, and I think those things maintain are consistent. And then as long as when you go through, we had 3 coaching changes in 3 years. 3 coaching changes in 3 years, and then you've had 4 or 5 coordinators in 4 or 5 years, and so you're always, what we're trying to do even after this year is try to get back to some consistency. The good news is our fans have stuck with us. And when you're recruiting and you show people a place that's different, in the mountains of Western North Carolina, the atmosphere is different. Passionate fan base, full stadium. That doesn't happen everywhere. It's in the mountains. That doesn't happen everywhere. We call it the flatland. There's a lot of stadiums in the flatland, right? There's only one that's up in the mountains of Western North Carolina. So you really got to recruit to what is different, and not the same as some other folks, because we all have the same weight rooms. We all have the same nutrition and, resources for our student athletes. It's how do you differentiate? How do you continue to recruit? And for us, it's been passionate fan base. It's been a different atmosphere. The mountains are not for everybody. And we say that in every recruiting visit. But if you come, it's special. And I think those that have come and played here is special. And then folks want to know that they can get to the NFL from here, and they can. And we've proven that with draft picks over the last couple of years since I've been here. And so that allows us to continue to recruit at a high level, not just student athletes, but coaches and support staff.
Yeah. So I'd like for you to comment on the Sun Belt. You guys obviously have have had some changes here forthcoming. Keith Gill has led that effort, and I've talked to a number of Sunbelt ADs on this podcast over the course of the last several months. And the key theme I'm hearing is, hey, we conference and made it even more competitive through it. And at difference, we've talked a lot about football so far, Doug, but the reality is that, and for that matter, on a lot of other fronts. I'm curious as to why that the new Sun Belt is meaningful to you.
Well, I think yes, and the new Sunbelt I think is outstanding, and the colleagues that I get to work with each day, and certainly our leadership and Keith still have done an amazing job building this league and investing. We've talked about it as a group. If we want to be successful, we got to continue to invest, and everybody's made a commitment. And you saw this year, and sometimes I jokingly say, "Be careful what you wish for." I mean, there's no days off in the new Sunbelt. Every pick a sport. There's no days off in any sport that we're playing. But I think that's really, really good. It's really, really competitive for us. We need to be a multi-bid league in more sports, and we will. A little bit disappointed this fall with some of our sports, not in football, where we should have. I think we should have had more than one bid, and we didn't get it. But I think that's a maturation process. We got to continue at a high level. We got to continue to schedule at a high level. And as I tell everybody, with anybody in our league, a win against the Sun Belt teams, a win against is as good as a win against anybody in America when you go to a 12-team playoffs, particularly in football. And so that really levels the playing field when you talk about, oh, we got to go play this level of team, or no, you just got to go play good football teams and get good wins, and or good losses if you go if you go play, and it's starting to really kind of play out that way. But I think for us, the Sun Belt, when we reconfigured, built it on geography, passionate fan bases, and winning at the gate, and we've seen that. We've certainly seen it at Appalachian, and we're going to continue to chip away, and I think be one of the top leagues in America.
That's great. So Alden's Army, much has been said about Mike Alden and his effect on the industry through the leadership he exemplified at the university, but also the number of folks who came through the institution and have gone on to become athletic directors. I actually ran into him last week, and he was having coffee with Laird Beach and Brian Maggard and Ross Buell. Great success. What did you learn working for Mike Alden? What do you think others have learned from Mike that has come from his leadership, his mentoring that has led you guys into these roles?
Yeah, I think that when you say that, probably the first two things that come to mind are certainly attention to detail. Little things make a big difference. And the other thing, I think, is just be proactively collaborative. And we all learned that from Mike, certainly. And that's collaborative across campus, collaborative within the department, within sports, and building relationships. So I think, yeah, it's certainly evident with all of us. And I think probably for me, one of the best parts of everything is that we're all buddies, right? There's that connection. And so there's some different text strings here and there. Yeah, there's a lot more lessons. Those two pop to my mind: attention to detail and being collaborative. And can never thank him enough for his mentorship. I worked for him twice.
Doug, another question I'm interested in. You obviously had a leadership role at ISP for a number of years, being there 2002, 2012, working with our good friend Ben Sutton. And then now you've been an athletic director at Appalachian State for 8 years. My story is a little bit of the opposite, right? I was on campus for 26 years, 8 of those as an athletic director, and then now have been with Learfield in the multimedia rights business for 4. I've always said to my colleagues, both ADs and those who I work with today in the MMR business, that I think that there is a lot that goes on in the MMR business that perhaps ADs don't quite understand, and that's on us to communicate more effectively. And then vice versa. I believe the opposite is also true. And there's a lot that happens on campus that the multimedia rights business may not understand, because of all the nuances and the folks you have to serve and the bureaucracy and all that kind of thing. You have had an extensive time period in both of those chairs. I'm interested in your juxtaposition of those two that could be helpful to those who are, and by the way, the listenership here is a niche audience, right? So it's athletic administrators and it's those who are in industries that are serving the athletic enterprise. So you can really provide some good commentary out here, I believe.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that how many times as on your side you've heard an AD say, "Well, you're not paying us enough," and on our side we're saying, "Hey, you're not paying you're not paying us enough."
Yeah,
So that's certainly I got to hear it a lot. Now I say it a lot. And so in some ways it's kind of interesting. But no, I think the two go hand in hand. I mean, we can't survive. Without somebody that helps us market our products, right, to corporate sponsors. And certainly now when you kind of look at the NIL, and what that looks like, and where that's gone. I think MMR folks even have a more impactful role to play. And I think I'm glad to see, we're a Learfield school. I'm glad to see that Learfield has taken a more proactive approach in the NIL space, and I think for us that's helpful. And so, but also on the athletic director side, yeah, you have a lot of different constituencies that sometimes on the MMR side, you don't really realize the consistency, and you don't necessarily all the time realize the impacts of wins and losses. That like, and I don't know if you would agree with this. They just a little bit stronger when you're on, in the AD side. When I was at ISP and we were representing a lot of schools, I mean, I won half, lost half most of the week, in that time period. Here, in the AD chair, they sting a little bit more, perhaps, and
yeah,
certainly the ramifications. It's hard to know. I didn't realize on the MMR side, like, at App State, go 6-6 for a year, and realize, some of the, which we just did, realize some of the trials and tribulations that causes in this chair. I think sometimes I certainly didn't know that on the MMR side.
yeah. And I think it behooves us all to make sure we're communicating on that front, because I think both sides of that equation are really attempting to deliver in a profound and competitive manner for each other, and you're really locked in that endeavor. So good stuff there on that. You mentioned NIL. I'm curious how you guys have attacked the NIL narrative, what you're doing in that space. I know earlier this year when we met, I think you had over 100 student athletes that had some type of NIL deal that had occurred. Where are you now? Let's call it 6 months later from our breakfast up on the mountain back in July.
Yeah, Troy's Diner. We can't wait for you to come back. Only the best. But so yes, I think we're continuing to grow and progress like everybody has. Certainly feeling our way in. Kind of, walking, not running necessarily. But we're in the marketplace business, like with influencer. We feel really good about that. I'm certainly working with Learfield and have some discussions with Open Doors. Also, I do think, what we found is, certainly we have a collective here, and making sure that we try to manage that to the best of our ability. And not, when I manage, we all know that I don't mean day to day, but what does that look like? What does that feel like? Where are they acting and being active with our student athletes? And then certainly growing, you've starting to see a lot of my colleagues across the country coming out, publicly and talking about this stuff. It's becoming more and more important. You've got to be in the game, and you've got to win, right? And so, because somebody else is going to, and certainly as we're all in this, the kind of heat of recruiting season right now, for the sport of football in particular, my coaches call me every day saying, "Hey, did you hear this? And these people are doing that." And had an opportunity to be out at SBJ and talking with some folks out there. Now, not all the rumors are true. And I told my coach that too. Like, not all the rumors are true about all this, millions of dollars that's flying around in the NIL space. But you do need to pay attention, and you do need to be active, and you do need to have a plan. And I feel really good about all of that for us here at App State.
Continued evolution, right? I mean, you think about where we've come in the last 18 months from when this entered the discussion. If you started talking, 5 years ago, if you'd said, you're going to get paid for your name, image, and likeness, you got the transfer portal, you can make your move whenever you need to make the move. They're going to be collectives paying you for your services, those kind of things. You think it was like an episode of the Jetsons or something, right? You're off into the future, but now here we are, and we're learning as we move through all this. Hey, look, as we begin to come down the backstretch, I am very interested in giving you an opportunity, because we did focus on football so much at the beginning, to talk a little bit about some of your other points of pride in your other sports programs. I know you and I have talked briefly about Dustin Kearns and the job he's doing in the men's basketball program. But what else is on the horizon for the Mountaineers as you enter the winter and spring seasons in your athletic programs?
Yeah, I think certainly, as you mentioned, unfortunately, it was during the COVID year. I say unfortunately only when Dustin in his second year took us to the NCAA tournament, won the Sun Belt Conference, and ended up in Indianapolis. Unfortunately, we were in the pandemic, so it was all during the quarantine, and you kind of got to hang out in your hotel room for a long, long time. But certainly continued success in the sport of men's basketball. Last year we were second in the conference, our highest finish in the regular season. Last year our women were fourth in the conference, our highest finish in the regular season. We continue to progress in baseball and softball, which are in the Sun Belt Conference, really, really operated. Certainly, this year we had a new women's volleyball coach in Sarah Noble that completely flipped the script in terms of what we were able to do in volleyball. A new women's soccer coach, Amy Haywood. We had the best record we've ever had in field hockey, went 14-5. And Meg Dawson was coach of the year. What some folks might not know, we're a perennial top 25 program in the sport of wrestling, which is a great sport up here. Packed crowds at every home meet, compete with the best in the country, home and away, which has really been electric as well. Certainly, we've always been great in cross country. So we just built a brand new $6 million track. Lots and lots going on that we're really excited about.
Tremendous. Well, look, man, I appreciate you taking the time out to join me today. As always, informative. Have great respect for what Appalachian State Athletics has accomplished, but have even more respect for what the job you do there and how you've gone about your business. Total class act. And so thanks for stepping away for a few minutes to take time out of what I know is a busy schedule to spend a few minutes on the podcast with us, Doug.
Outstanding. Always being with you, Mike. Thank you. Thanks for all you do for college athletics as well. Learfield's been a great partner.
My pleasure. All right, folks, you've been listening to From the Chair. Our guest today has been Doug Gillin, Director of Athletics at Appalachian State University. We hope you will listen to our podcast every week on all the audio platforms and view them right here on YouTube as well. We'll see you next time. Have a good week.